stops, launches deep. Jalen Guyton, he's got it. Touchdown Chargers. What a throw.
And now, your hosts of the Shock Therapy Podcast, Tyler Lawrence and Zach Alfers.
All right, bro, we're back. Been a couple weeks, 3 weeks since the last pod. So much is going on in the football world. We just got done with OTAs. We're in mandatory mini camp right now. Training camp's right around the corner, and I am super excited about this magazine that you had a chance to edit. You read the whole thing. Tell me a little bit about the magazine that I wrote.
I'm excited. I'm excited, man. I mean, lots of good content. It was really like reliving the entire season, some good, some bad, especially the last game. I could feel it reading your recap, just all of the ups and downs that I felt throughout that entire game, but throughout the entire season. Like I said, there was a lot of good. Ended on a really bad note, but gets you really, really excited for what's to come. I think it's a brilliant glimpse of last season, and you did such a good job recapping everything, adding your insight there. And I just think from last season's to this one, you took tremendous steps as an author and as a magazine, just laying it out. I know you were dabbling with your InDesign skills. I just think it's overall a much better product than we put out last year, and I can't wait to get it out in front of our listeners and in front of our fans, because I know you put a lot of hard work into it. I put a lot of focus just to edit it, and I'm really excited with the final product that we came up with.
Yeah, man, you go from the very first magazine. I don't know if you ever saw the first magazine, the Masterbolt magazine.
I have that one too.
All of these errors all over. It's terribly written. It was my first major project as a writer. I go from that into last season, which was a big step forward. I did it all in Microsoft Word. Now that I have been in InDesign, there's no way I could ever go back. And this one, it's a beautiful visual masterpiece is kind of what I like to call it, because visually it is so much more refreshing with all the photos and everything that I put inside of it. The design, I actually bought a ton of other Sports Illustrated magazines and looked at how they kind of designed the different pages. It looks like a real magazine, like a legit magazine, because it is.
It is. I mean, it looks like it. That's what it is.
It is, but it actually looks like one, where the ones previously, they didn't look like magazines. They were magazines, but this one, I mean, I was pulling from all kinds of different magazines just to try to, I was going on Pinterest, looking at magazine layouts, whatever I could do to find to really make this something great for our fans, for our listeners, for everybody, basically. And the PDF, totally free. That's something I'm doing this year for the first time. I'm not trying to make money on these things. I'm really just trying to make my money back. Also, something really, really cool. Sean Merriman is going to be signing 20 copies. We'll be providing those randomly out to people. You can't just buy a copy of this. Is more of just like a thank you to the people that are supporting me, supporting our podcast. I'm going to be driving all the way out to Vegas from San Diego to get those signatures here in the next couple of weeks. But I'm stoked, dude, because I mean, it's part of the reason why we took this time off, so I could focus on finishing the magazine. And I'm just stoked, man. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and $16 to get that piece of art with the possibility of getting a Sean Merriman Charger Hall of Famer autograph. Like, there's no cheaper option to get a really cool piece of Charger memorabilia. And you're helping out, an up and coming podcast. So get on it, listeners. If you
see that
haven't
Sean
already,
Merriman jersey behind me?
I see it hanging. It's so good looking. And how did that all come about? I saw the tweet. the tweets that you sent me, but I'm just curious, and I'm sure some of our listeners are too, how you brokered that relationship and got him to agree to sign 20 copies.
Yeah, so I've been trying to get copies signed for a couple seasons now. I tried to get Austin Eckler to sign my first copy, didn't happen. I tried to get Justin Herbert last season. That didn't happen.
And
then I started looking around and I was like, all right, like maybe a player that's not like active right now, somebody who likes to give back to his community. And Sean Merriman is awesome at that. And I've seen him in the past. People have asked him, hey, can I get a signature on something? So I reached out to him through Twitter. First, I kind of blasted him because you can't send messages to certain verified people if they don't follow you or whatever. So I blasted it out, and I can't remember who, but one of those guys who purchased my magazine was like, hey, Sean, listen to him. He's not your normal fan. I think I'm just a normal fan, but anyways, and he ended up DMing me back, and I was like, yes. And I was like, yeah, he said, like, how many do you want signed? I was like, I got 125 copies.
Yeah, all of them.
And I guess he has a contract with Panini where he's only allowed to sign so much memorabilia, kind of on his own. So he said he'd sign 20 copies. I'm driving, 6.5 hours, probably on a holiday week. I'm probably going to go out there 4th of July weekend. I'm going to be sitting in massive traffic. I'm going to be spending a lot of money in gas with where gas is at today to go and get 20 copies signed. But I'm super stoked, and I'm going to try to keep getting future versions signed. I'm going to start naming them, the edition of whoever signs them. So this is going to be the Merriman edition. Next year, who knows, maybe I'll try to get like a Akeem Osgood or another retired player. And the goal is to get those players to sign the back of it. I'll do some sort of visual. There is a Sean Merriman, photo on the back of it. And that's kind of my goal. That's kind of what I'm hoping to do every season. That assumes that I can get a player to sign every season. But it's really thankful to Sean Merriman, if he's listening, for signing these copies for me. It means a lot to me, man. So today we're going to be going over kind of a full off-season recap, something that I don't think that anybody's really done. And there's been so much that has happened this off-season. And I feel like this is a good time to kind of just recap everything that happened. And there was a lot that happened. Probably one of the busiest off seasons I can remember. So Chargers season ended 9-8. The season ended, and the first thing that they did was they went and fired the special teams coordinator, Darius Swinton, and they hired Ryan Ficken to be the special teams coordinator. Ryan Ficken, maybe you can tell me a little bit about Kene Nwagwu and just how much improved the Viking special teams was just from him taking that role last season. Yeah,
well, after, I think, run defense, I think we all know that was our biggest weakness last year. After that, especially early on, our special teams was horrid. We got some answers figured out. Signing Dustin Hopkins really helped solidify the kicking game, which I'm glad we brought him back. We brought in Andre Roberts, who really added some juice into the kick return game. Unfortunately, he didn't get re-signed, but we replaced him with a younger, impactful player, I think, in DeAndre Robert, who has a little more impact on the receiving end, and we can get into that a little more here later. But besides that, the coverage team's awful. Our punting situation still not figured out, but I think, cleaning house in that phase of the game, going for some new blood, bringing in some new philosophy on a team that is ready to win now, it is really impressive and exciting. Ryan Ficken, I think, brings some reliability, completely turned around a very bad special teams unit over in Minnesota with the 2 years that he's been there. But yeah, Kene Nwagwu, tough name to say, but absolutely great kick returner. 32.2 yards per kick return on his named first team All-Pro his rookie season. I think Ficken has a lot to do with that. Also, I'm just excited that we're finally putting some, effort into fixing that unit. It's been really, really bad for us for over a decade now. It's got it's taken massive strides last season, and now I'm hoping that it continues to grow with a new coordinator in place. And I'm excited to see what Ficken can do with all of these units, not just one or two. It's 4 units, and they are significant. I know it's a third phase. We like to forget about it when you look at the offense and defense. It can't. And just look at teams who compete in the Super Bowl. They have good everything, 1 through 3. You can't forget any one phase along the way. And I'm excited to see what Ficken can do with this unit.
I do think that, while the special teams unit was massively upgraded from the season before, because we've been at the bottom, 25 for as long as I can remember. It's been a really, really bad, and it's all coverage units, right? We've had some juice in the return game. Sure. Prior. Andre Roberts had the most kick return yards in the entire NFL last season, but that wasn't the issue. The issue was starting field position, and the Chargers were at the very bottom of the starting field position all season long. Ty Long was not directionally kicking in a way that allowed his kick coverage units to get downfield. Also, we had, I wanted to say, 2 blocked punts and a lot of really close calls along the way there as well. This is all about not just improving the return and units, but to really get down and cover and field punts and make sure that we're not giving up a lot of those hidden yardage, not starting Justin Herbert, inside his own red zone, because that was the major issue all season long. And so the goal is to see Ryan Ficken improve the coverage units, and that's ultimately why Darius Swinton was fired, even though the Chargers special teams units was somewhat solidified after we made those signings in the middle of the season. So moving on.
Well, so the Chargers. Just one little thing I wanted to touch on. I saw today after our first day of mandatory minicamp, they have Jalen Guyton out there with the first team Gunners. Hasn't played Gunner in his career with the Chargers, but I just like being able to put an athletic guy a little further down on the depth chart now that we have Josh Palmer kind of coming into his own. So what do you think, Jalen Guyton can provide as a gunner on a position that is super valuable for those coverage teams?
Well, I think you're automatically looking at Jalen Guyton being your wide receiver 4, and wide receiver 4 is a definite special teamer. We have DeAndre Carter. I think DeAndre Carter has to earn it. I think Jalen Guyton was here. He was already on the depth chart. Preseason depth chart doesn't really matter much. So the fact that he's out there with the first team doesn't mean much right now. We'll see kind of once training camp rolls around, but I think he's going to have an opportunity to return kicks. As far as the gunner units are concerned, I mean, there's a lot of guys to cycle in there. You look at Bryce Callahan as our, wide receiver, our CB4 potentially. Michael Davis should probably get some looks out there as well. We have a lot of corners, a lot of DBs that could play that kind of unit. Overall, I think that this is just kind of preliminary, throwing guys out there, getting people comfortable so that, in a pinch, in week 16, 17, and we're hurting with injuries, a guy like Jalen Guyton can come out there and play it because he's, taking snaps there in the offseason, even if there's no pads on. I think it's all preliminary right now.
Sure.
I think they're just trying out different things, seeing, and, looking at it here, you can see if a guy can get down there, right? If he can get off press, because a lot of times on punt coverage units, they're going to get pressed. Can the guy get off press? Can he get out there, stay in his lane? Those are all things that you can find out right now without pads on, right?
Well, and I just think it speaks a lot to the depth on this team that we're talking about Michael Davis and Jalen Guyton as possibilities at gunner.
Yeah, we haven't seen that. I think I don't remember who was our gunners last season. I saw a lot of guys taking snaps out there. I saw Asante Samuel taking snaps out there. I saw Keeman Hall out there at times. This is real preliminary. This is a really deep team, probably the deepest depth chart that I've seen in a long time, where a lot of guys that we think are going to make the roster may not even be on the roster on the final 53, may not even make the practice squad because it's deep. You're probably going to see Jasir Taylor. Is that the player that, we got in the 6th round, the corner? He'll probably get some snaps out there. I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Davis sees snaps out there. Like I said, it's a deep team, and we're just now figuring out, who's going to be out there. The Chargers signed Jamal Davis to a futures contract shortly after they fired Darius Swinton. He was a XFL player, if I do believe. Not a player to make the roster. Not a lock to make the roster by any means, but just added depth as a future potential practice squad player. And then right after that started the extensions. Mike Williams signed a 3-year, $60 million extension. That makes him the 8th highest paid wide receiver, kind of around that Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Brandon Cooks, Keenan Allen mark. Hill's making $30 million a year, along with Adams and Hopkins making over $27 million a year. So looking at the fact that that's $7 million a year saved as the 8th highest paid wide receiver, I think that's well within his, his value. But I also think that Mike Williams is going to be instrumental to this offense next season. I think he's going to take over the reins as our true wide receiver 1, even over Keenan Allen, as Allen's getting a little bit older, maybe not being quite as productive, still plenty productive. But what are your thoughts on Mike Williams? He was our probably most important free agent this offseason.
Absolutely. I know there was a lot of chatter about letting him walk. He wasn't worth the money. The receiver class coming out in the draft was deep, which I think is kind of not fair to what Mike Williams did last season. He was phenomenal for us. He was so clutch when we needed a big play. Mike Williams was there, and he transcended his game to a level we hadn't seen before. He became a complete receiver, not just a jump ball threat. That jump ball threat is still there, but he was much more than that. Running routes, we never seen him before because he wasn't asked to. He was phenomenal for us, and it took a strength of ours from last season, which receiving core, which was our skill players, and it retained that, which I think as a team who's close to competing at the highest level, you don't want to take strengths and turn them into weaknesses, and it would have absolutely been a weakness for us if we let Mike Williams go. And signing him for what we did, I think we got him a deal. What we were going to pay him a significant amount of money if we didn't extend him, and we ended up extending him. It freed up a lot of money, which really kind of allowed us to go after all of these really big free agents that we would end up going after in the upcoming weeks.
The most important thing you said was clutch, right?
Absolutely.
You look at that final game of the season, he had 2 of the most important plays in the entire season. The final play, obviously, to end the half, scoring that touchdown, sending the game to overtime. And then in overtime, he had another huge catch and run that set up the field goal attempt. Chargers could have won in that situation right then and there. He did drop a touchdown in the end zone right there, kind of a contested grab. It was close. I remember him saying, after the game, like, that was game. That was the game. It was in my hands. But he came through on so many different occasions. I'm thinking back to the Browns game. I'm thinking back to the Chiefs game where he scored the touchdown in the first matchup there. Like, he came through in the most important moments, and keeping that continuity with Justin Herbert, the entire offense got better, and we were a top 5 offense last season. So the fact that we got better with continued development from a lot of our young guys, from Josh Palmer, we're going to upgrade at our right guard position. We'll talk about him in a little bit. And even Gerald Everett, I think, is going to be an upgrade. I think overall this offense is going to take a step forward, which is insane to think that this offense can actually still get better. Plus, Justin Herbert's going into another season of development, first time under the same head coach in his entire career. It's just massive, the importance it was to bring Mike Williams back. The Chargers extended Dustin Hopkins after he solidified the kicking unit. First time we've had a solid kicker in a long time. 3 years, $9 million. That makes him the 17th highest paid kicker. So he is very at the middle of the pack, kind of in the same realm as Cairo Santos, Matt Prater, Greg Zuerlein, and Matt Gay. The value of having a kicker that can hit those from underneath 40 relatively easy, and then he gives you a 50-50 shot from over 50. That's just massive. He kicks touchbacks. He is a very, very important part of this special teams unit, even if the Chargers are going to go for it on fourth down more often than not.
No, solidified. We needed a kicker. We haven't had a kicker since Kading, and Kading had his own problems. Don't see that happening with Hopkins. He made some game-winning kicks for us, and hope we get to put him in a position this year to, send us to the playoffs, send us to the Super Bowl. I hope he's ready for these high-pressure moments because they're undoubtedly coming this season.
Yeah, it was just insane the fact that the Washington Commanders let him go.
He shouldn't have been. Yeah,
that was just insane. I'll let you go ahead.
Take it.
I'll go ahead and let you talk about our exclusive rights free agents, Storm Norton, Jalen Guyton, and Donald Parham.
Yeah, 3 ERFAs we re-signed. I think all in their own ways were necessary to being brought back. Storm Norton is right now slated as our right tackle. At that very least, I was hoping to use him as a depth piece because, behind Rashawn Slater, that tackle room is very, very slim. There's a lot of talk about bumping Filer out there, but I like being able to, keep that continuity on the left side. You're inserting a new piece in Zion Johnson at right guard. I know Storm Norton struggled, but there's a lot of talk that he's been improving. Trey Pipkins is still there. I'd still like to see another body in there, but Storm Norton was necessary to be brought back at the very least as a depth piece, and right now he's slated to play a lot of football for us. Hopefully he gets better. He can't get worse. So I guess that's a good thing. Jalen Guyton. Jalen Guyton's also excelling, a young player who has a lot of speed. He's getting better. I don't think it's too early, I think, in his career to completely write him off. And so he's going to have a place in this offense. We're talking about him as wide receiver 4 right now, slated as gunner, taking reps out there at gunner. So he's going to be playing some snaps, whether it be on the offense or whether it be on special teams. He's going to be significant for us. And Donald Parham, glad he's coming back. He had, a really rough end to his year. So one of the craziest injuries I had ever seen, just getting knocked out the way he did. He was phenomenal for us, very clutch, well-deserving to be brought back. And I'm excited with no Jared Cook in the rotation behind Gerald Everett, Donald Parham is going to get a lot of looks. He's an absolute red zone nightmare and very, very productive with the minimum targets he received last season, and he's just getting better. He's definitely going to be in line for more targets this season, and I'm excited to see what he can do with them.
The Chargers released Brian Bulaga, saving $10 million against the cap on March 15th. This is right after the start of free agency. I think it was reported a couple days after, but according to their transaction list, they did it on 3/15. Brian Bulaga was probably one of the biggest misses in the Tom Telesco era. And it's not that his talent was a miss. It was the fact that he just couldn't play. He played very, very little the first season we signed him. And then last season, I think he had one drive before he got knocked out. He was supposed to be the guy to solidify the right tackle position for the Chargers. Had a really, really, really good career with the Green Bay Packers, blocking for Aaron Rodgers. But in the end, I guess the injuries just piled up to a point where he just couldn't play through them anymore, had the lower back injury. It kind of sucks that we never got the chance to really see how he could have played. He is still a free agent. He may end up hanging him up because he just was not healthy enough with 2 seasons essentially of not playing. Terrible for the player, good for the Chargers because the Chargers needed the additional cap space to make the next couple of signings that they would when free agency opened up. Right before free agency opened up, though, the Chargers traded a 2nd-round pick and what would eventually become 2 7th-round picks after they traded their 6th for 2 7th-round picks with the Bears during the draft. and they signed Khalil Mack, which is probably one of the most exciting trades that we've seen in the Tom Telesco era. What does Khalil Mack bring to this defense that is just going to change everything for the Chargers defense?
I mean, you're adding. You said this is probably one of, and you said the biggest trade in Telesco's era. I don't remember a more impactful trade. My entire life watching the Chargers. Like, this guy is, a former defensive player of the year, a guy who can impact the game at so many levels, not only because he's a great player, but he brings the right attitude. He's a hard worker. He's a guy that's not, he's willing to mentor younger guys on his team. And I still think this guy has a lot left in the tank. He's coming off of an injury that only saw him play 11 or 7 games or 7 weeks last season. The way I'm looking at it is he's going to be absolutely fresh, ready to prove himself in a new powder blue uniform, with under a guy in Brandon Staley who he's had tremendous success with, aligned across the lineup from a guy who he's never played with in Joey Bosa. So those two guys are absolutely going to terrorize quarterbacks when you have them drop back and pass to throw the ball. But also, both of those guys are extremely underrated run defenders. And so which was another big weakness of us, I think but Joey Bosa got after the quarterback enough, but now it's one of those, pick your poisons. You're going to commit how many bodies to which side of the line. Now, what are you going to do when you undoubtedly stack them up, because Joey Bosa can play that DN position? When we put him on the same side, offenses are going to have a tough time figuring out what these guys are capable of, especially with a creative defensive coordinator, head coach, but defensive coordinator, in the sense that he's calling our defensive plays. He's very creative in Brandon Staley. He's going to scheme these guys. And I'm just so excited to see Khalil Mack, that 52 in powder blue, because we've been talking about, getting Joey Bosa his Batman or his Robin to his Batman. I really think we got a Superman, and we're forming our own Justice League. This is going to be a terror for quarterbacks, and if they're not already on our schedule losing sleep, they'll definitely be once some clips come out of training camp, because these guys are going to be absolute nightmares lined up next to each other.
I love the fact that you brought up the fact that they were going to be potentially playing on the same side, because one of the most dominant things that we've ever seen as Charger fans was Joey Bosa lined up inside of Melvin Ingram. And that was back during the Gus Bradley days, and that was scary to see, because Melvin Ingram was at the top of his game at the time. Joey Bosa wasn't even at the top of his game, but I mean, he ended up winning Rookie of the Year that season, Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think that is going to be a chess piece to really watch, and then you're going to see Kyle Van Noy on the opposite side, a really smart instinctual player we'll talk about here in a minute. But I think the fact that you've got 2 potential Defensive Player of the Year candidates on either side, I honestly believe this might be the most dynamic pass rush duo in the history of the NFL, even if Khalil Mack is a shell of his former self. But he's not that far removed from having that Defensive Player of the Year type of season from years past. I mean, yes, he's 32 years old, but this guy still looks super healthy, super strong. And it really, like you said, teams are going to have to pick your poison. This whole defense ultimately is the Avengers. It is the Justice League when you break it down at every single level. It really is kind of be really dynamic to see Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on opposite sides rushing the passer, because especially, you get to one hash, you put Joey Bosa on the inside, you put Khalil Mack on the other side, on the outside of him, and you can really close down an entire side of the field, preventing any type of getting outside the pocket and really forcing those quarterbacks that like to scramble to the sideline, to the short side of the sideline. Really limits the ability for quarterbacks to keep the play alive. The Chargers went and signed Sebastian Joseph Day to a 3-year, $24 million contract. He's making $8 million a year, makes him the 21st highest paid defensive tackle, aligned with Ashawn Robinson, Michael Brockers, and Malik Collins. Sebastian Joseph Day is probably one of the best run defenders in the entire NFL, especially as a true nose tackle. Had his best season playing under Brandon Staley with the Rams. Has one of the highest run defense, highest run stops. He is an absolute monster on the interior of that defensive line. And he's got the size that Brandon Staley wants. He fits the scheme. I think this is a really under the radar. Not enough people are talking about this signing, because for the Chargers to have the worst run defense in the entire NFL last season, and it really, really made them lose way more games than they should have. It was the weakness to their defense, and I feel like their interior defensive line is now a strength in the NFL. So what is Sebastian Joseph Day going to bring to this team that we were lacking last season?
Well, I think you touched on it. I mean, imagine Sebastian Joseph Day, just one play. All we needed him was that final play of the year. He is a run stuffer, true, through in every sense of the word, can clog multiple lanes, and he works hard. He's one of those high motor guys, and he's young. You're going from Linval Joseph, who's on the end of his career, to a guy who's just scraping the surface of what he's capable of. You said how successful he was under Brandon Staley, and now he gets to come back to a guy who understands how to utilize him correctly. We do not have an Aaron Donald, but I don't think it's necessary when you have the pass rushers we're talking about, and then his other interior lineman or interior D lineman running mate that we're going to get to here in a little bit. I'm really excited to see what he can do. He can play multiple positions up front, and he's just a gamer. Brings that attitude that Brandon Staley has been wanting to, has said from the moment he's got here that he's wanted to change. He's a culture guy, a high character guy. I think, everybody in the locker room kind of gets along with him. And it's for one, he's an easygoing guy, but because he also plays the right way, whistle to whistle, and I'm excited to see him in powder blue also. I think every one of these guys on this list are going to be absolute studs, especially paired together. One player is not going to do it. It's everything. It's the whole puzzle piece, and he's just a piece, but he's going to be one hell of a puzzle piece.
And then you're just talking about Austin Johnson just now, 4 years, $7 million average. He's a 25th highest paid defensive tackle. You're talking about pairings. We're talking about Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa on the outside. You're talking about a pairing with Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson. They're in the middle. And then the next pairing that we're going to talk about, J.C. Jackson with Derwin James and Asante Samuel there. Like you said, this is a pairing. Everything is pairing perfectly. It's just like chef kiss. Like everything just flows together so perfectly. J.C. Jackson, 5 years, $82.5 million. He is only getting paid $16.5 million a year. He is the 9th highest paid cornerback, along there with Byron Jones, Darius Slay, Carlton Davis, and he's better than all three of those players. We got JC on a major steal, and we've got him for 5 years. More than likely going to play the 4, get some sort of contract extension if he plays up to his ability. He is going to be a key piece to this defense, because the Chargers didn't have a Jalen. What's Jalen's last name? Ramsey. Chargers do not have a true lockdown corner as of right now. The last lockdown corner they had was Casey Hayward, but Casey Hayward was not a man-to-man type of player. He was not a player that got a whole lot of turnovers, except for the 1 year where he had 6 interceptions. Yeah. J.C. Jackson totally changes the entire dynamic in the passing game, and he's a turnover monster, which is just a key importance to this defense. Is generating turnovers, which puts you in good field position, which makes you not even need special teams, right? Because you're totally skipping that phase of the game when you get those turnovers. J.C. Jackson is a baller. what does J.C. Jackson, what is he going to bring to this defense outside of the interceptions when it comes to just the energy he's going to have with Derwin James?
Beyond all that, it's like you were saying, it allows Staley to do exactly what he's envisioned for his defense. Replicating the production of a Jalen Ramsey is very tough, but I think right now, I think those guys are neck and neck with what they're able to do. He can shadow the best receiver, and he's going to take them completely out of their games. You were taking a look at the receivers that J.C. Jackson went up against last year. They had their worst games of the season and in several seasons when going up against him. He completely takes people out of their game. He is an eraser. Pick your best receiver because he is not having a game. Bench him in fantasy when they're playing against the Chargers because J.C. Jackson is that. He's locked down, and he gets in people's heads. It only takes a couple of plays for a receiver, even the caliber of Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, the best of the best. It only takes them a couple snaps lined up across from J.C. Jackson to realize that they have no shot of being productive because he's an absolute beast.
The Chargers, after they signed quarterback Chase Daniel to a 1-year, $2 million deal. This is, again, bringing that continuity to Justin Herbert. It's all about helping Justin Herbert learn the playbook, get the mental side of the part of the game down because he's got all the physical intangibles. And Chase Daniel is that guy to bounce ideas off of, see the game from a different angle, seeing it through a veteran quarterback's presence. And he's got that familiar Lombardi. I think Chase Daniel is a really, really good signing because it's really, really important for the development and growth of Justin Herbert. The Chargers also signed Christian Covington, re-signed Christian Covington to a 1-year, $1.3 million deal. This one left me a little head scratching a little bit. Like I didn't fully understand, if they're going to clean house, why wouldn't they fully clean house, especially when I don't think Covington played his best ball last season. But I think that you're looking at his size, his strength, and the potential of him being lined up around better players on either side of him. It should improve his play from what it was last season. He is still a young, improving player, and we love the size of this guy.
Well, and I think that's it. I think we brought him back because we didn't see his full capabilities, and I think the coaching staff saw enough to realize, we add all of these other pieces around him. He's going to take strides. He just being the size of him, we really just need him to not get blown back the way he was. And it's hard when you are, lined up against Linval or next to Linval Joseph, who wasn't as productive as we've known him to be throughout his career. When you have Jerry Tillery just running past everybody and everything that he needs to make contact with. I kind of saw Covington kind of, trying to overcompensate a bit. And so when things aren't, when he's not relied on to be, a difference maker, I think you're going to see him, impact the game because he's what, 4, 5, or 5th best defensive lineman, and that's throwing into the account that we're not going to see anything from Jerry Tillery. So I think he's in a much better place with the talent around him, and he has nowhere to go but up right now. And I think the coaching staff believes in him, and that's why they brought him back.
And ultimately, I think that when you're around bad players, you're going to play bad. When you're around better players on either side of you, it brings out the most of your own abilities because, Brandon Staley said like one of his key core teaching points is competition, right? Having competition. And when you're competing with a lower crowd, you bring your competition level down a little bit to kind of meet everybody else. Yeah. With a guy like Sebastian Justin Day, Austin Johnson, who was a 2nd-round pick, when you've got 2 Defensive Player of the Year candidates on the outside of you, when you bring in a really, really smart veteran like Kyle Van Noy, we're about to talk about here in just a second, when you bring all these pieces together, it's going to bring your own game up. It has to, because you have to be able to compete and bring your game up to that same level so that you can go and play with the big boys. The Chargers did sign lost my notes here for a second. The Chargers did sign Kyle Van Noy to a 1-year, $2.2 million deal. Kyle Van Noy is very instinctual, smart player, very cerebral player, and he's a guy that you can throw at linebacker in a pinch if you really need to. He's going to be able to pick up this playbook really quickly, without a doubt, in my mind. He always had his best seasons with the Patriots under a good coaching staff, had a really, really bad season with Detroit under a bad coaching staff. So I'm expecting him to not play up to the level he did with the Patriots. That would be crazy considering he's much, much older. But I think that he's going to be a player's coach also. He's going to be a rotational player. He's not going to play nearly as many snaps as he has in previous seasons. He could end up being the fourth edge rusher. I think he's going to play edge. I know Brandon Staley was talking in his press conference today that he's kind of going to be a positionless player for the Chargers.
Yeah.
And what that tells me is they have a plan for him at linebacker, but they also have a plan for him at edge. And I think it's going to be on a game-by-game matchup where he's going to end up playing and where the Chargers need him, whether that's for injury, whether that's for game plan, whatever it is. I really like the signing because I think that you need a veteran presence on the defense, a guy that can help bring everybody forward. Even if he doesn't know the playbook right away, he brings that leadership aspect to it that's just so important in my eyes.
Veteran presence and Super Bowl winner. And we added several Super Bowl previous Super Bowl champions. Yeah, and it takes a different type. Talent will get you so far. You need that. Yeah, you need that mental as well. And I think Kyle Van Noy brings a lot of that versatility to play outside, play off ball linebacker when needed. But he wants to win. He's been at, he's tasted the Lombardi Trophy. He knows what that feels like. And a guy like him wants to settle for nothing less. I think the biggest thing that signing told me was we no longer have to overpay for players past their prime. Guys are taking discounts. Kyle Van Noy could have signed somewhere else with his resume for more than $2.25 million somewhere else. If he wanted to chase a bag, he could have done that. He came here for one reason, to compete for a Super Bowl, and I think that tells me a lot about where this Charger team is going. When in the past, we were overpaying for the Brian Bulagas. We were overpaying for guys at the end of their career because nobody wanted to come here, so we had to compensate them with money. Now we have something that guys want to be a part of, and that Kyle Van Noy signing really hit that. Really sold me on that idea that this team is different than it ever has been.
The Chargers upgraded their special team units even further when they signed long snapper Josh Harris to a 4-year, $5.6 million contract. You don't see long snappers usually signing for more than a year, maybe two. They kind of bounce from some team to team to team. I think that it's an under-the-radar signing because you're also getting a player who has played in a Super Bowl with the Falcons years back, right? But as I think he was a rookie at the time. They signed J.K. Scott from he was a free agent last year, but he was a draft pick for the Packers who just didn't pan out. A couple more seasons under his belt. Probably not the most important signing in terms of like who was available. There wasn't very much available out there. We have no idea if this is going to be an upgrade over Ty Long. But we needed to make a change there because Ty Long was we got rid of the long snapper, we got rid of the kicker, we switched 3 times. We've had 3 different special teams coordinators. The last remaining piece that we had not gotten rid of was Ty Long. And so when you look at it overall, we just kind of revamped the entire special teams unit. The only player we ended up really keeping was Dustin Hopkins after he solidified the kicking game for us. And J.K. Scott, he's a camp leg. I think that he is going to get some additional competition. I don't know if it's going to be this USC punter that we brought to camp, rookie mini camp. I don't know if we're going to go find somebody else who becomes available as the season progresses, as training camp progresses, as rosters start kind of becoming more solidified. J.K. Scott's not by any means locked and loaded as the team's punter. but I think that we are trying something else out, somebody else new who was a fairly high draft pick as a 4th-round draft pick. So we'll have to see where that ends up going. And then the Chargers also signed tight end Gerald Everett to a 2-year, $12 million deal. He is a 22nd highest paid tight end around Nick Boyle, Tyler Conklin, Austin Hooper, Mo Alley Cox. None of those guys are real solid starters, and Gerald Everett's going to be our starter, and I think he's a lot more athletic. Why don't you tell me a little bit about Gerald Everett?
Yeah, $12 million 2 years, $6 million a year, I think is way too low for Everett, and I understand why. He has not really taken those tight end 1 snaps, so he's getting paid tight end 2 money, but he is so dynamic when you look at the tight end position with the ball in his hand. His ability to – how many tight ends do you see take jet sweeps? Screens to the house, I think, is you see a little more of that, but jet sweeps, this guy is dynamite with the ball in his hand. With an offense that we have now with Lombardi, he's going to find creative ways to get the ball in his hand, and that's all you really need with Everett. He's going to be very, very interesting, and we don't really need him as a deep threat. He can do that too, but you have Donald Parham. You have several receivers on this roster that can get open downfield, so he is just another Derwin James type chess piece, but on the offensive, maybe not Derwin James caliber, but just the versatility of what he can do. Line him out wide, line him up tight, take jet sweeps, throw screens. He's dynamic, and he adds an element to this offense, I think, where we saw it a little bit with Steven Anderson. I thought Steven Anderson was our best yard after catch tight end last season. Doesn't have the blocking acumen that Anderson has, but I don't think we need that as much with as McKitty progresses. I'm really excited to see what Gerald Everett can do, just because of the highlights that I've seen this guy put up in year in and year out. Once he's been in the league, he is fun player to watch.
He was always much better with Russell Wilson at quarterback.
Right.
He kind of got stuck with Jared Goff there with Seattle. I think this is going to be the first time he's going to have like a legit quarterback for a full season. And I think the Chargers got a legitimate receiving threat to pair with Donald Parham. And then you got your inline blocker there with Trey McKitty. I really like the signing. I think it's an under the radar signing because he is going to be our tight end 1. And I think that he's going to take that step forward. Statistically, he just hasn't always had it there, but I mean, different type of offense, different type of quarterback, and all the room for growth. The Chargers also signed Troy Reeder, Will Clapp, and Morgan Fox, all to deals right around $1 million. Troy Reeder was there to provide some sort of depth, especially after Kenneth Murray's surgery, kind of late offseason surgery occurred. They do think that Kenneth Murray is going to be available for training camp. I know that he is out of his boot. He is walking kind of on 40, 60% body weight right now, which is good news. So he's progressing pretty well. They did say that his surgery was a success. They do not expect any type of complications. Then the Chargers also signed DeAndre Carter to eventually become the Chargers kick returner, punt returner. I know that he may not be at the top of the depth chart. We already talked about that earlier. I think that's kind of like a preseason kind of seeing what Jalen Guyton can provide there. I fully expect DeAndre Carter to be our full-time punt returner, kick returner. And then Bryce Callahan, 1 year, $1.3 million. That is a huge, huge deal for one of the top slot corners in the NFL over the last couple of seasons. I know injuries piled up, which is a major reason why he was not brought back to Denver, why he was not a pretty highly touted free agent this offseason. But this guy is a baller. I think he's going to be our starter in the slot. And I think Asante Samuel is going to get pushed back out. And Michael Davis is going to be our CB4 playing on the outside. Because I really think that Bryce Callahan is healthy. And we know that Brandon Staley is going to emphasize the health of this team during training camp. I think if Bryce Callahan is healthy, we are going to potentially get a Pro Bowl caliber season out of him because he's a baller in the slot. Anything you want to talk about with those 5 players I just mentioned?
Yeah, I guess I'll just finish it off with Bryce Callahan, I think to me, I think the most important thing about that signing is it's going to allow Staley to play his 3 to 4 best DBs at any given time. And so it gives you that flexibility to not have to put Asante in the slot if you don't want to. If the matchup requires it, we definitely can, with Michael Davis able to play outside. And I mean, so it gives you a lot of flexibility. You have a lot of players now that can play in the slot. Derwin James thrives there. Mark Webb is becoming a player who can play in the slot. So it gives you a lot of options to mix and match. I think it's going to be another one of those Kyle Vinoy chess pieces that changes week to week. But to give a guy who is as smart and sees things the way Brandon Staley does, another DB who he's also had success playing with, I just think adds another element, which is just going to make this entire team, it's top to bottom. You're not going to know what to expect from this Charger team, and it's going to change, I think, quarter to quarter, week to week. And I'm really excited to see what Bryce Callahan can do for us when he does play it, because I do think, he's another player that had an off year that is just going to thrive in a new system, a change of scenery, surrounded by talent that he hasn't seen in a very long time.
You know, when I'm looking at our DBs there playing in the slot, playing outside, I look at a team like the Dolphins that we're going to play this season, right? Where they have Jalen Waddle, and they also have Tyreek Hill, 2 smaller, fast slot type players who are going to be the emphasis of that offense. And I see Bryce Callahan playing a major role in a game like that. Whereas Colts kind of toward the end of the season, where they have, you know, Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman, Michael Straken, all these guys that are 6'4", 6'5", where you might want Michael Davis on the field covering those outside corners more often. I think it's going to come on a case-by-case basis depending on who we're playing, because if you're playing big receivers, a team that, you know, kind of emphasizes size, playing more on the outside, taking those deep shots, versus playing a team like the Dolphins who have some of those smaller, quicker slot wide receivers, you know, get the ball out of your hands, doing a lot of screens, a lot of those types of things. I think that's kind of the perfect example as to when you'll see Bryce Callahan on the field versus Michael Davis, and when you'll see, you know, the flip side of that. I think if you want a player who can go run deep, has that speed and size, I think you definitely want Michael Davis out on the field more often than you'll. I mean, it makes a lot of sense just looking at the size and matchups that you're going to end up seeing as the season progresses. So it's a case-by-case basis, right?
Yeah.
Moving on to the NFL draft. So the Chargers drafted in the first round Zion Johnson. Zion Johnson is an under the radar. I know when I was at SoFi Stadium when we ended up picking him, it's not a sexy pick, right? It's an offensive guard, but it is the best interior offensive guard in this class, in my opinion, and most people's opinion. Zion Johnson is going to totally transform the Chargers' run and pass. His ability to just do all those little things that you want him to do. Go ahead and tell me why Zion Johnson was the right pick for the Chargers at 17.
It was necessary. I mean, we our left side of the line, very nice. Right side of the line was the weakest part of our offense last year, and we got a steal. The fact that he was there, the fact that he wasn't the first guard taken, I think was just a mistake by, I forget which team took another guard, and the other guard is fine, but Zion Johnson is just, I think, you know, an absolute monster, and he's going to, like you said, impact both phases of the game, and he's a really cool guy. I was excited to, you know, hear him.
He's a nerd. He's such a nerd.
Call him a nerd. He definitely is nerdy. I mean, but I like it. He's unique, right? He's not, you know, afraid to speak his mind, and even though he's different, he's okay with that. He embraces that, and then on the field, you know, all of that switches. He's one of those guys who is out there to perfect his craft. He's going to overwork. If you tell him to go home, he's probably going to go home and be similar to Rashawn Slater, where I think he's going to be like a guy who takes pass sets on a cruise ship. And I think you need these guys. You need these guys if you want to compete at the top level. I know that, there was several other players available that, Chargers fans were kind of hooting for, but to be able to give Justin Herbert even more time to be the phenomenal thrower of the football that he is going to, and also on top of that, pave ways for the run game. Last year, it was Justin Herbert snapped the ball, kind of hide on the left side of the line because that right side of the line was just getting torn up, and we could not run the ball to save our lives on the right side. So Zion Johnson does a lot to help that. We're going to need some help from that right tackle, but I think a guy with the pedigree of Johnson's, with the talent of Johnson, I think it's going to help Storm Norton significantly, or whoever plays tackle out there.
I think we keep saying Storm Norton. I don't think it's going to be Storm Norton this season. I think this is Trey Pipkins' season right here, right now. Contract year, 3rd-round draft pick, working with Duke Manyweather. Let's just speak it into existence now. Like, our starting offensive tackle is going to be I'm already forgetting his name. I just said his name.
Trey Pipkins.
It's going to be Trey Pipkins. It's going to be Trey Pipkins, right? He's taking that step forward. He's got the pedigree. I'm ready for it. The Chargers drafted J.T. Woods in the 3rd round, safety out of Baylor. I think that the biggest takeaway from J.T. Woods is, one, he's a turnover machine, has a ton of interceptions over the last couple of seasons, and he allows Derwin James to come into the box. He allows Nasir Adderley in certain sets to come into the box. And he is a very rangy, very fast safety who can play sideline to sideline. He has some issues with his tackling, with his fundamentals. Can't be worse than what Nasir Adderley's been the last couple of seasons in that kind of realm. And I think that he's going to see a significant role on this defense, even in a defense that is loaded with players up and down the depth chart on every position. I think JT Woods fits the scheme very, very well. He's a young, moldable player, and I think that he's going to play a massive, massive role. And he's going to be one of those players that's kind of a sleeper to be one of those rookie candidates, like rookie of the year type of candidates for the Chargers, just based off of where he finds himself in this role.
And a true center fielder. You talk about all of these DBs we have on this team. He brings a little. He's the only one that can play. Like, if we were still in the Gus Bradley system, I don't trust,
Nasir Adderley.
Nasir Adderley as, the single high.
And that's what Nasir Adderley was supposed to be, right? Like, Nasir Adderley was supposed to be that true center fielder, that true free safety, that cover 3 safety, who just never hasn't panned out. Played much, much better last season toward the back half of the season. Rookie year kind of knocked off due to the injury. Right. True center fielder in the Gus Bradley scheme did not work out well for him. Last year under Brandon Staley, he started taking a lot of strides, especially kind of deeper into the season. The game that comes to mind to me is the Texans game, where he drilled the I forget who threw it, but they ran a reverse, a Philly special, and he drilled whoever it was that was throwing that Philly special. That was the Broncos game. It was going to Drew Lock, actually. You just saw him really take massive strides forward. He's going to be a free agent next season. Depending on how JT Woods plays this year, I don't think Nasir Adderley may be coming back.
It's possible, and I mean, JT Woods is starting this offseason off really hot. I know he had an interception today in the red zone phase of practice. And so, starting his pro career, doing exactly what he did in college, which was pick off a lot of passes. So excited to see what he can do.
Do you see Isaiah Spiller being the Melvin Gordon to the Austin Eckler in this offense?
It's going to be – I see where you're – well, I think it's going to be yes and no. So I think he has the size. He has a similar running style. But I think the only reason I say why I say no is because Austin Eckler was, the RB2 to Melvin Gordon's 1, right? And I think it's significantly switched because of how dynamic Eckler and the strides Eckler has taken the last couple of seasons. But I do think with Spiller's, physicality, being that size, it's going to take out, a lot of wind in the defense to tackle a guy like that. And when you got a guy, the best Charger to ever play, and LaDainian Tomlinson, one of the greatest running backs of all time, talking about Isaiah Spiller, that he's already a fan, hasn't met the guy, but is really excited for Spiller. That should get you excited too. I mean, Tomlinson knows what he's talking about. He's not a guy to just say things to say things. And I'm really excited to see what Spiller can do. At the very least, just being confident to give Austin Eckler a break. I think we utilized him, leaned on him a little too much. You saw him even after week 4 or 5 get tripped up on some shoestring tackles that when he was RB2 to Melvin Gordon was running right through those, taking them to the house. I think we got, put a lot of miles on Austin Eckler last season. At the very least, Isaiah Spiller gives the offense a chance to just give him a break. And I think he's going to do more than that. I think he's going to be one of the more productive RB2s we see in the league because I think he's that capable. Also a guy who can, and he's also a guy who's going to be able to impact the receiving game. I really hope Larry Roundtree or Joshua Kelly can figure it out and be a legit RB3, but neither of those guys catch the football very well at the NFL level. I don't see the same thing happening for Isaiah Spiller. He's just a little different in that facet of the game.
Oops, that was my phone. I really like Isaiah Spiller. I've kind of come around on him. He wasn't one of my favorite running backs in this class, right? But the more I watched him, it's just his style of play is different than what I kind of like. He's a player that has size and power, but he's also somewhat agile. He can make guys miss in the open field. He can run through guys. And I really think that Isaiah Spiller is going to be coming into his own. I think that he's a good complement to – that's kind of what I see in him. Like I see some of the power Melvin Gordon had, that strong running through tackles, not going down on first contact, maybe not making guys miss. I think Isaiah Spiller has a little bit more of that, being able to make guys miss. And as I actually went and compared some of their the Wisconsin tape to the Texas A&M tape, kind of looking at what made Melvin Gordon good in college, I think that Isaiah Spiller is better as a college player than Melvin Gordon was. I think that one of the things that you take away from it is I think that Wisconsin had a really, really good offensive line. And I think Texas A&M had Kenyon Green, and that was about it. So I when I look at the two players, I mean, Isaiah Spiller was more productive season over season over season, having over 1,000 yards in every season he was playing there, and he was a starter as a true freshman. Now, granted, Melvin Gordon was competing against Damian Harris. He was competing against James White there. He had a lot of guys that he was playing there with, so he didn't get the opportunity to start right away where Isaiah Spiller did. But I really think that Isaiah Spiller is going to play a massive role in this offense as the change of pace back. I think he's going to finish. He could potentially finish with more overall carries, maybe not more touches than Austin Eckler, but more true rushing carries than Austin Eckler does. Because I think that Austin Eckler is going to be used more as a scat back because that's what he should be. Austin Eckler is at his best in space. So a lot of screens, a lot of check downs. He's gonna get carries because he's earned the carries for sure. But I think Isaiah Spiller's the better true running back just in terms of just downhill, one cut and go. And I think he's gonna impress a lot of people. The more that I watch him, the more that I like him. The Chargers drafted Otito Ogbonia in the 5th round, nose tackle at UCLA. This is one of your guys. Tell me a little bit about Ogbonia.
I'm excited for Otito. I don't know where he kind of fits in on this depth chart, but big run stuffing nose tackle, which we could have utilized tremendously last season. And I think it's just another depth piece to help fix what was our Achilles heel last year, which is our run defense. And so another guy who just doesn't give up. I think he's very raw, and I said it when we were looking at D tackles. I think he's a guy who isn't going to impact the game right away, but we don't really need him to, given the other guys we've added to that room, and the guys in Christian Covington and Jerry Tillery that are also in that room who we're expecting to be better. I think he's going to have a very tough time making the final roster. He's also going to be competing with guys like Braden Fajoko and Forrest Merrill, who have been here for a little bit, so I have a little more familiarity. But this team drafted him in the 5th round for a reason. I think he adds something that this team's been missing. High motor guy. He's going to stuff lanes, and so I'm excited to see what he can do. I really think he might be a practice squad stash for this season, but I don't think it's a knock against him. I think it's you're shaking your head. You think he's playing?
I don't think he's playing. I think he's making the roster, and I think he's bumping Braden Fajoko out. So yeah. I think if Braden Fajoko's been here for a couple seasons, I think that the fact that they spent draft capital as a practice squad stash, as a 5th round draft pick, he's going to get picked up. Somebody's going to pick him up. Somebody who's lacking depth on the defensive line. And I think Braden Fajoko is more likely to be able to be stashed and not picked up.
That's fair.
I think the fact that you used a draft pick to get a Tito means that you see enough in him, and I think that they're looking at the size, and I think that they want size on the defensive line. Guy. He's much bigger than Braden Fajoko, maybe not quite as strong, but he's got the size that Staley's looking for. He fits kind of the scheme, the mold of the type of defensive lineman that the Chargers want. I think Braden Fajoko is on the chopping block. I think he's going to really struggle. I know he's a fan favorite. I like Fajoko as well. It's not always about the best 53. It's about the right 53. And ultimately, when you spent a 5th round draft pick on a Tito, I think that you kind of played your hand there and you said, hey, I'm all in on this guy. We're going to they have to keep him on the roster. The 5th round draft pick, they have to keep him on the roster. I just don't know how they don't, right? Like, it's just one of those things where it's a high enough draft pick where I feel like he has to make the roster. He has to.
I think you're right.
If he doesn't, somebody's going to cut a Braden Fajoko on their roster to make room for him.
Yeah. Well, and then, but besides, if he makes the roster, I think you're right where he has to make the roster. I just don't see him really playing much outside of, like kick block and
no, I don't think he's going to play at all. And I think we have the depth there. I think that the one sleeper thing that could potentially happen that would be a little bit crazy is we cut Jerry Tillery.
That's not so.
That's not wild at all. That's that's really plausible. I think Jerry Tillery's starting to come into his own. He has improved from his rookie season, but he is still a bad player. And I don't like saying that, but it's true. He's a bad player. He's just not very good. You can say, oh, yeah, he wasn't at, OTAs until the very end. I don't think that really matters. It's OTAs. It shouldn't matter at all as a player who's already played in the scheme. You're just going through walkthroughs at OTAs. OTAs isn't about your on field. It's about you being in the gym. And I'm not saying that he wasn't in the gym. I just don't think Jerry Tillery has a future on this team. And if he doesn't have a future, then that's the player you're going to cut, right? Are you really going to lose that much? Is he better than Braden Fajoko? I don't think so, actually. Honestly, I really don't. Jerry Tillery's best ability is his pass rush ability, and he doesn't have the pressures to back it up. If he was like a 4th round draft pick, I'd be like, okay, you got what you were expecting from a 4th or 5th round draft pick, but he was a 1st round draft pick. So I'm literally looking around trying to get a 7th or 6th round draft pick for a guy like this, because I don't think that we have room for him to play significant snaps. And as a 1st round draft pick, you have to have him play significant snaps. You have to develop him. And right now, he is at least third on the depth chart behind Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson. Morgan Fox potentially going to beat him out. And then you start looking at some of these other guys like a Tito, who's a true nose tackle, not going to be a pass rusher. Brain Fajoko, a run stuffer, not a pass rusher. The only place that Jerry Tillery has on here is his ability to rush a passer. I know he had like 5 sacks last season. That's not indicative of his pressures, though, because his pressures are down. He was one of the worst pass rushers in the NFL last season still, and that's what makes him good. So where does he fit on this defense? I just don't see the fit. I would be looking at trying to – it's even better for the player to get a fresh start somewhere else. It's better for the player. It's better for the team, the outlook of the team, who's going to be on this roster next season. It's not going to be Jerry Tillery. I don't care. Even if he has a decent season, I don't see his fit as the big body type of player that you want there. He's not he doesn't have very much definition to his frame. He's tall and he's athletic. I'll give him, he is athletic, but he is not a good player through and through. And maybe he just needs that fresh start somewhere else. I just don't see Jerry Tillery making the roster. The Chargers drafted, I'll kind of skip through these last couple guys a little bit quickly just for the sake of time. Jamari Salyer from Georgia, offensive guard. I think there is a path toward Jamari Salyer finding a starting position in the next couple of seasons, whether that's, Matt Filer next season. Matt Filer is going to be a free agent in year after next. He signed a 3-year contract last season, played last season. He'll play this season. Next year, if Jamari Salyer has the type of mini camp that we're expecting him to have, we thought that he was a value steal type of player. Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard, cornerbacks drafted in the 6th and 7th round. I think these guys are going to have a hard time making the final 53. One of them, I think, potentially could make it. I think it's really a battle for one spot. The Chargers keep 6 DBs. Xander Horvath has a legit chance to be the Chargers fullback to make the final 53-man roster because, honestly, Gabe Nabers has not panned out very well. I know he's a very athletic H-back type of player. I don't see him as a tight end. I don't see him as a true fullback. I see him more kind of in that, fullback pass-catching role. But if that's where you're placing him, I think Xander Horvath is a better type of player in that kind of role. One of those is there is a path for all 3 of those players to make the roster. Jasir, Leonard, Horvath, Sawyer's making the roster without a doubt. Yeah. Whether or not it's Jasir or Leonard making the final 53 to be seen, and whether or not it's Gabe Nabers or Xander Horvath, that's going to be a really tight camp battle to watch.
I want Xander to make this roster, and even if he can't block, I don't think we need him to be able to pave the way at that much.
I think he's more physical than Gabe Nabers anyway, so he should be a better
bigger,
blocker
anyways. He's faster. I think he's more dynamic in the run and the pass game. I think he deserves a chance because Nabers is, besides being good friends with Justin Herbert, I think that is, and maybe being a good grill mate, that's really all Nabers has provided. And so I think
I bet you he a good brisket. That's about it.
I think he bases the brisket. I don't think he even helps besides that. I think Herbert does all of the work, and then
every half hour he walks out.
Duty.
Every half hour he walks out with a apple cider vinegar and sprays the brisket.
I think he's basting. I think that's all he's doing. He's basting and leaving shopping carts at the end of the parking lot for Herbert to get angry about. I don't know what else Nabers is doing. I think it's time for new blood, and Xander Horvath is an absolute athlete. The things that guy can do at his size are impressive, and I think he deserves a shot.
Yeah, I think Xander is the guy to make it. To close off this podcast, we're going to talk about some of our offensive defensive departures. We're not going to go real in depth because I don't think it really matters. But offensive departures, Justin Jackson's not going to make this be here with us. KJ Hill left in the middle of the season last year. Jared Cook, Steven Anderson, guard Michael Schofield. Odea Bushi said his farewells just a week or two ago. And then Scott Quisenberry on the defensive side of the ball. Linval Joseph won't be back. Justin Jones is with the Bears. Uchenna Nwosu is going to be playing for the Seahawks. Kaiser White, probably the biggest, most painful player to see go away. He's going to be an Eagle. Chris Harris Jr. is a free agent. And then Ty Long, we'll see if he even catches on anywhere. That is all the players that will not be part of the 2022 Chargers, Los Angeles Chargers roster. I don't have anything else. I'll let you close this out, Zach.
I'm closing it out with my Warriors are going to win their fifth championship in the last 8 years tomorrow. It happens. You heard it here first.
I'll let you close that out with that. Manny Machado just hit his 1,500 hit.
That's sweet. I'm also a Pods fan.
If you're a Padres fan, we got some Padres news. If you're a Warriors fan, there's your Warriors news. Let's hopefully we see the Warriors. Man, the last thing I want to say before we get into it is 30 did not have the best game, the final game. And they still won.
Well, all that means is he's due to drop 50 tomorrow, and I'm expecting an absolute dynamite game from Curry. You can't, even as great as he is, he's due an off game every once in a while. In the finals. They still won, so it doesn't matter. He's still averaging 30 points. He's dropped 40 twice this season in these finals. That was his worst game. And credit to the Celtics. They have been playing tremendous defense. But I think all that means to me is he's going to have a 45 to 50 point game tomorrow.
They're 3-2 right now, right? So tomorrow they win. It's done and over with, right?
One more game, whether it comes today, or whether it comes tomorrow or in Game 7. I hope it doesn't get to that point. I think we close it out tomorrow. I think the momentum's on our side.
I hope it goes to Game 7 because I like seeing a Game 7.
Everyone hopes it goes to a Game 7, but
win and go home.
No, I'm closing it out. 50 points from Curry tomorrow.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to buy your copy of the Shock Therapy magazine. You can contact me at LAC Shock Therapy or LAC Master Bowl or Zach Alfers. I don't care. Buy your copy.
Your
Support
choice.
Small business. I don't care. I do care because I spent a lot of money to print these, so I need to make my money back. Thank you guys so much for listening. Sorry it took so long. Over and out.
Stops, launches deep, Jalen Guyton, he's got it! Touchdown Chargers, what a throw!
And now, your hosts of the Shock Therapy Podcast, Tyler Lawrence and Zach Alfers.